The Sea Squirt. You have a brain because you need to move through a world full of decisions. Where to go, what to eat, when to run. The Sea Squirt's larva has the same situation. A tiny tadpole-shaped creature with a primitive spinal cord, a notochord, and a small but functional brain, swimming through open water, trying to find somewhere to settle. It spends days doing this, navigating, processing, using that brain. And then it finds a rock, attaches permanently, and does something no other vertebrate cousin does. It dissolves its own brain as a calorie source. The neural tissue, the spinal structure, the notochord, all of it gets reabsorbed, digested like a meal the animal ate itself. The larval nervous system weighs less than a grain of salt, and even that the adult won't keep. What's left is a ganglion about as complex as a smoke detector, minus the batteries, running a body that now just filters water all day. Biology is merciless about overhead. If you're not moving, the brain that ran your movement is an expense with no return, and the Sea Squirt settles that account immediately. Somewhere along the line, nature decided the most sensible thing you can do with a brain you no longer need is eat it. And the Sea Squirt has been proving that right for over 500 million years. The most rational thing the Sea Squirt ever did with its brain was decide it didn't need one. The Box Jellyfish. Most people think learning requires a brain. You need neurons that can reroute based on experience, and you need something centralizing that process. The Caribbean box jellyfish has none of that. No centralized brain, just a diffuse nerve net and 4 rudimentary processing clusters called rapallia arranged around the bell, 1,000 nerve cells total. And in a study from the University of Copenhagen published in 2023, researchers trained it to avoid obstacles through conditioning anyway. They used gray and white stripes to simulate the mangrove routes the jellyfish navigate in the wild, pairing the visual signal with mild electric shocks. And after 15 to 30 trials, the jellyfish changed its behavior. The learned response stuck. What it has instead of a brain is a rapallium that receives sensory data and outputs motor commands locally, at the tissue level, without routing anything through a central processor. Neuroscientists spent decades building frameworks for the minimum requirements of associative learning, the same class Pavlov demonstrated, and a jellyfish handed them a counterexample with 1,000 nerve cells. The animal that disproved a foundational assumption in cognitive science looks like an upside-down umbrella with commitment issues. The jellyfish didn't need a brain to learn. It needed 24 eyes and absolutely no ego about how the learning happened. The sea sponge. Before neurons, before brains, before any centralized signaling, something had to come first. The sea sponge has 0 neurons, no nervous system, no muscle tissue, no movement, no response to the outside world beyond slow calcium signaling that ripples through its cells like a chemical rumor. It draws water through thousands of pores, filters out food particles, and pushes water out the other end. That's the entire operation. But here's what's strange. The sea sponge's genome contains gene sequences that, in vertebrates, build the postsynaptic scaffolding of the synapse. The molecular hardware for neural communication is sitting in the sponge's DNA, unused. The leading hypothesis is that those genes do something else in the sponge, coordinating filtration timing or synchronizing cellular behavior during feeding, and that the neural application came later in other lineages. The sponge isn't a missing link. It's just an animal that found a way to survive 400 million years without assembling any of the parts it's been quietly holding. The human brain has 86 billion neurons and 100 trillion synaptic connections, and the sea sponge has 0 of any of it, but does have the gene sequences that build the backbone of it, sitting unused since the Cambrian. Nature's most patient project. All the parts, none of the assembly. If you're enjoying this kind of deep look at animal biology, I post this kind of content regularly, and I'd really appreciate it if you subscribed. Thanks. The C. elegans roundworm. In 1986, a team of scientists published the complete wiring diagram of Caenorhabditis elegans. Every neuron, every connection, the entire map. 302 neurons, 7,000 synaptic connections, the same exact count in every individual, reproduced with no variation. It was the first complete connectome of any animal, and it seemed like the kind of thing that would explain the animal entirely. It didn't. C. elegans is 1 millimeter long and lives in soil. Its entire nervous system occupies a volume smaller than the period at the end of this sentence. If you took those 302 neurons and laid them end to end at the width of a human neuron, the chain would stretch roughly 1/4 of an inch. From that 1/4 inch of neural tissue, the worm navigates, forages, avoids threats, learns simple patterns, and regulates sleep. A study published in 2023 found that the circuits controlling direction change in this 1 millimeter worm are functionally analogous to motor circuits in the human brain, a gas pedal and a brake release, at opposite ends of the complexity spectrum, doing structurally similar things. 302 neurons are sufficient for everything C. elegans needs to do, and that sufficiency is exactly what biology selected for. It's 1 millimeter long and has been a foundational model organism for human neuroscience for half a century, which says something clarifying about one of the two parties involved. The simplest nervous system ever mapped keeps generating research questions that a 100 billion neuron brain can't fully answer. The Etruscan Shrew. Everything about mammal brain science says a smaller brain means slower processing, worse coordination, less adaptive behavior. The Etruscan shrew has the smallest brain of any mammal by weight, about 60 milligrams. A grain of rice weighs around 25 milligrams, so you're talking about 2.5 grains of rice running an entire warm-blooded predator. A domestic cat has a brain roughly 300 times heavier and hunts at a speed the shrew would find leisurely. The shrew is not leisurely. Its whiskers brush a cricket one single time, and within 25 milliseconds, 1/6 of the time it takes a human eye to blink, it has identified the prey, classified it, and initiated a kill strike. The shrew's cortex is almost entirely reorganized around touch-based hunting. The high neuron density, around 170,000 neurons per cubic millimeter, compensates for the small volume by packing more processing power into less space. This isn't a diminished brain, it's a compressed one, stripped of everything except the hunting loop, which is why it runs faster than a much larger brain burdened by more overhead. The shrew eats twice its body weight daily to power a brain the size of 2 grains of rice, which is either the most efficient metabolic setup in mammals or a lifestyle that needs a serious conversation with a nutritionist. 60 milligrams, the most efficient predator on 4 legs. Brain size, it turns out, has never been the variable biology cares about. The kakapo. Parrots are among the most cognitively complex birds on the planet. African gray parrots demonstrate abstract reasoning and long-term memory. Kias solve multi-step puzzles and use tools. The kakapo is a parrot. It's the largest parrot by weight, up to 3.5 kilograms, and it evolved on New Zealand in total isolation from land predators for tens of millions of years, which means there was no selection pressure to develop the threat detection circuitry that makes other parrots sharp. Its encephalization quotient sits at the floor of the parrot range. When something approaches it today, the kakapo freezes. Not runs, not flies, freezes and stands completely still, which works against a static ambush predator that hunts by detecting movement, the only kind New Zealand had before humans showed up with rats and stoats. Against anything that can smell, it's catastrophically useless. There are fewer than 200 kakapo alive right now, and every breeding attempt is individually monitored and managed by conservation teams. Other parrots have encephalization quotients comparable to dolphins. The world's largest parrot becomes very still when threatened and believes this will work. The males evolved a mating call so confusing that females can't locate the source, which is a solution to reproduction with very specific results. The kakapo spent 50 million years perfecting a survival strategy that assumes nothing would ever try to eat it, and was right until it wasn't. The Bony-Eared Assfish. If you're going to hold the record for smallest brain relative to body size among all vertebrates, it probably helps to also have the most memorable name in ichthyology. The Bony-Eared Assfish, Acanthonus armatus, is a deep-sea fish found between 1,000 and 4,800 meters down. Its brain-to-body ratio is about 0.03%. A human brain represents roughly 2% of body weight, about 66 times higher. A mouse's brain is around 3.5%, over 100 times higher. For decades, the assfish held the vertebrate record, and then a 2024 analysis handed the title to the whale shark at 0.0026%, making the assfish's brain look comparatively generous. What it has instead of brain is ears, specifically enormous otoliths, the calcified structures used to detect vibration and pressure, proportionally larger than in any other vertebrate. In complete darkness at several thousand meters, you don't need vision or higher cognition. You need to feel what's moving. A deep-sea fish named after its bony head shape, holding the vertebrate record for least brain per body for most of recorded science, is exactly the kind of sentence that keeps ichthyologists employed. It lost the record to a whale shark, making it the second worst, which may be the most ignoble runner-up position in vertebrate biology. The Bony-Eared Assfish lost the world record for smallest relative brain, not because its brain grew, but because someone finally measured a whale shark. The koala. The koala's brain fills about 60% of its cranial cavity. The remaining 40% is cerebrospinal fluid. The brain simply doesn't reach the walls of the skull. It weighs about 19 grams, less than a AA battery, and its cortex is almost entirely smooth, with very little of the folding that gives most mammal brains their expanded surface area. A human brain weighs about 3 pounds and is densely folded, giving it roughly 2.5 square feet of cortical surface area. A cat, which weighs roughly the same as a koala, has a brain over 3 times heavier with moderate folding. The koala's cortex is missing most of the folding responsible for complex association, which is why a koala presented with a bowl of eucalyptus leaves may not recognize them as food unless they're attached to a branch. The smooth cortex can't make the context connection. 40 million years surviving on toxic, low-calorie eucalyptus means the metabolism can barely sustain the brain it has, and a more complex, folded brain would need more calories than the diet provides. Despite the smooth brain framing, koalas aren't dumb in any meaningful evolutionary sense. Turns out the smooth cortex is an energy adaptation. The brain is small because the food is terrible, and a bigger brain would starve before doing anything useful with its extra processing power. An animal that spent 40 million years becoming the world's most specialized eucalyptus expert still can only recognize eucalyptus when it's on a tree, which is either perfectly fine or a sign that specialization has a ceiling. The koala's brain is the right size for a diet of poisonous leaves, which tells you exactly how much evolution thought a larger one was worth. The sea star. A study published in 2023 proposed something unusual about sea stars. Their bodies might be one giant modified head. Most bilaterally symmetrical animals develop from 3 distinct body regions: head, trunk, and tail. Sea stars don't seem to have a trunk. Genomic analysis found that the sea star expresses head-type genes throughout its entire body, with no trunk equivalent, just head tissue arranged radially, moving in 5 directions. Sea stars operate on a distributed nerve ring around the central disc, with radial nerve cords extending into each arm, giving each arm a degree of independent motor control. A human nervous system runs on 1 brain, 1 spinal cord, and an outward hierarchy. The sea star's equivalent is a ring with 5 branches, no command center, no feedback hierarchy. If a human brain tried to issue all its motor commands through 5 independent limbs with partial autonomy and no central override, it wouldn't function. It would be a different kind of thing entirely. That's essentially what the sea star is. Scientists wrote a paper proposing that a common marine invertebrate is entirely made of head. Peer reviewers approved it, and it got published. The sea star has been solving locomotion without a brain for 500 million years, with zero indication it finds this unusual. No centralized brain, no command center, just a body that figured out how to be entirely its own headquarters, and has been doing it for 500 million years. The ostrich. The ostrich is the largest living bird, weighing up to 320 pounds. Its brain weighs about 40 grams. Each of its eyes weighs about 60 grams. The eyes are larger than the brain. It has the lowest brain-to-body weight ratio of any bird, and the largest eyes of any land vertebrate, 5 centimeters across, roughly the size of billiard balls. A crow weighs about 1 pound and has a brain-to-body ratio 40 times higher, uses tools, solves multi-step problems, and holds grudges. The ostrich runs. Both animals are alive, which is the only metric evolution actually uses. In open savanna with long sight lines, the ostrich doesn't need complex cognition. It needs to spot a predator from several kilometers away and be faster than everything else on the ground. It reaches 55 miles per hour. The ostrich has eyes the size of billiard balls and a brain the weight of 2 batteries, which means most of the ostrich's head is dedicated to seeing things the brain is then going to panic about. The head in sand myth has been wrong for 2,000 years. What actually happens is the ostrich lowers its head to the ground when tending eggs or sensing vibrations, and from a distance, this looks like burial. Pliny the Elder documented the myth in 77 AD. It has not improved with age. The ostrich's eyes are bigger than its brain, its legs are faster than its decisions, and it has survived every predator Africa has produced for millions of years, which suggests the brain was never the limiting factor. The Stegosaurus. The Stegosaurus was 9 meters long and weighed around 4 to 5 tons. Its brain weighed about 70 to 80 grams. A lemon. The human brain weighs 1,400 grams, 17.5 times more, in a body that weighs about 1/400th as much. If you scaled a human proportion brain to the Stegosaurus's body, it would weigh roughly 35 kilograms, the size of a large dog, just in skull. Biology didn't build that. It built a lemon and ran one of the most successful large herbivores of the Jurassic with it for at least 5 million years. The iconic backplates weren't armor. Current evidence suggests they were used for thermoregulation, flushing blood to radiate heat or absorb warmth. The butt brain, the idea that Stegosaurus had a second brain in an enlarged sacral cavity in the spine, got proposed in 1881 and made it into textbooks for over a century. It was wrong. Turns out the enlarged sacral canal was almost certainly a glycogen body, a structure birds still have today, probably used for energy storage or nerve insulation. Not cognitive tissue, not a brain, just a pocket of biological fuel that someone in the 19th century mistook for cognition, and everyone repeated for 100 years. The Stegosaurus had a brain the size of a lemon, no butt brain, and 5 million years of Jurassic dominance, which is the clearest available evidence that evolution never once asked how smart you are. I post animal deep dives like this every week. If you want to see more, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.